Okay, welcome back to the speeder bike build. In the last video, we left off with a new seat and the this part here. And so in this one, we're going to focus on the flaps that go back here. And also in the last video, we saw this piece. So what I'm going to do now is put this in the mill and drill all those holes for the rivets. So let's get set up in the mill and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so we got all the holes drilled, and that one got a little messed up because the drill bit broke. And when it broke, it broke good, and or bad, I guess. I had a heck of a time getting that piece of drill bit out of there, so kind of boogered up the hole a little bit. That was here. But I'll probably end up using that as a bolt hole to hold the hinge in place, because I'm going to have to put a hinge on here. And as you can see, I've already got some rivets on. I'll get back to that here in a minute. But basically, I drilled all the holes. I broke them apart. Well, before I broke them apart, I milled the edge here and here, cut and filed the curve, and then I broke them apart, and then I put a slight little bend in them. I did have to anneal it with the torch a little bit and just put a little bit of a bend in it. And then I started with those rivets. And what I started doing was putting the rivet in. And one thing you'll notice, you can really see that boogered up hole there. But anyways, on the back side, I put a countersink in it because the problem is the rivets are the exact same length as the thickness of the aluminum. So there's no tail to smush over. Now, they are only cosmetic, so I could just JB weld them in or CA them in or whatever. But I decided to countersink the hole a little bit, and then I can hammer the backside and it would squish out into the countersink, and that actually locks it in pretty well. And then I had the idea to see if I could just put some solder on it, melt the solder, and have that fill in the countersink. And that didn't work as well. I mean, those rivets aren't coming out, so it did something, but it didn't really fill into the countersink. So I'm going to go ahead and just smush those in as well. Now, this is the back side. It won't be seen. And the hammer I'm just using that. And so basically, I put a rivet in it, and I put it on an aluminum block, and I just hammer the tail of the rivet until it squishes into the countersink, and that locks it in. But it was kind of damaging the aluminum a little bit, but I can sand that out. And you can see a few little marks there, but I'm not too concerned about that because I can sand it out. Plus, it's on an inside area. You're never going to see that side. You're only going to see that side. So I'm not too concerned about it. And if it really bothered me, I could put some filler in it and sand it all smooth because those end up being like flush to the surface. But they're locked in. They're not going anywhere. But I've got quite a few rivets left to go. Like I said, I'm going to use some of those for bolts for the hinge, And I'll use some of those for bolts because I'm going to have a bracket back here to like a little linear actuator. Something kind of like that right here. So when you move that open and close, the little linear part will move back and forth. So yeah, that's how it's going. I'll come back and show you when I have some more cooler stuff to look at. Okay, here's what that's looking like so far, and I'm pretty pleased with that. I think it looks cool. Like I said, I'm not sure what I'm going to do bolts or rivets with some of those. Two of those will be bolts, and a couple of those will be bolts, but I'll figure that out later. And again, on the back side, it looks pretty beat up, but that'll sand out nice and smooth. Plus, nobody's ever going to see the back side, so it's not that big of a deal. But so anyways, what I want to work on next is the hinge. And I made a simple little sketch of the hinge pieces. What I did not draw here is the side view profile will look something like that. And then the hole here. And of course, once that's cut out, so the holes will get drilled in here for the pivot pin. And that will fit into here. And once those are all cut out, I'll round those nice and round. So it's like a hinge. Bolts will go in here, top and bottom, or for each side, I guess. And so I found a scrap piece of aluminum, and I started making a couple of parts. So this is pretty much 4 millimeters thick, a little over 4 millimeters thick. And so this one is that part, and that one will be that part. And basically, all I did was I took a 1/4 inch end mill. That's not an end mill, obviously, but I took a 1/4 inch end mill. I came in here to make a surface that I'll start on, and then I just came over 4.5 millimeters and down 4 millimeters. And then I came over, leaving that 9 millimeter gap here, and then down, and then made the other shoulder, and then down, and then took out the middle here. So now what I need to do is take this over to the bandsaw and just cut it out on the line. And then, well, actually, before I do that, I'm going to put this back in the mill. And I'm going to come in here, right along here, and I'm going to take that surface and that surface down to make that profile. So I'm going to mill that down first, then I'll cut those out and drill the holes for the pivot pin and then round them, and that'll be a pair of hinges. And then all I got to do is do the same thing over here, and that'll give me both sets of hinges. So let me get those done, and I'll come back and show you what that looks like. Okay, here's that part back off the mill. You can see now I have that profile. So again, once these are all parted off, that will get filed round and a hole will go there. And so now I need to take it to a bandsaw and cut here and along here and then here, here to get those two pieces out. Now, one problem with using scrap aluminum or scrap parts is you can see I've used this as a backer to drill holes in other things. And yeah, there's a hole there I really didn't want. And that hole did not go all the way through. And I was thinking that when I machined that off, I would have gotten rid of that hole. Well, that might have worked if I'd have machined it off on that side instead of that side. So when I had it in the mill this way, I didn't see the hole because, again, the hole didn't go all the way through. And I completely forgot it was there. I fully intended on doing that side to hopefully just mill out that hole, like that one. But yeah, that kind of sucks. But shouldn't be that big a deal because my mounting holes will be like here and here. So that shouldn't interfere with anything, but still, it's kind of annoying. I'll probably just fill it with JB Weld and sand it smooth when I'm done. But let me get these cut off on the bandsaw and we'll finish them up, and then I'll show you what they look like when they're actually hinges. Okay, here's the hinge. And I just put a wire pin through it and it moves pretty well. It's a little bit tight, but that's fine. That way, when I put the flap up, it won't just fall down. And so this will get bolted on the back side here, and that will get bolted up underneath here. However, there's a problem with this. I can't use it as is, because if I just do that, this part right here will hit right here. So when the flap is up or opened, I need this to be up a little bit so it'll clear that, which means I need to put a spacer between that part and the hinge. So normally it'd be like that, so if it was just bolted like that with that bolted here, that would be flush with the edge of here. But again, that part would hit. So I need to figure out how thick a spacer I need. So if I just rest that right there where it would hit, that would actually be perfect. So I can cut a little square off of that to make as a spacer. So it'll be like that. So let me get that done and mounted, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I had to take the body off in order to try and set the hinge. I put that on where I think it should go with the body on, and I taped it in place. So I got some tape in there. Then took the body off and then temporarily super glued the hinge in place. And so now what I need to do is put the body back on just to make sure that nothing changed or moved. Okay, well, there's no need to mount it back on the body because I took the tape off and the hinge does not work. As you can see, it contacts right there. So the hinge point needs to be moved up. This is going to take some playing around with. So I got to figure out exactly how that hinge needs to be positioned. Maybe I need to change the design of the hinge, but yeah, that's not going to work. So let me play around with this some more, and I'll get back with you. So when I designed and built that first hinge, I kind of had a suspicion that it might not work, but I was being kind of stupidly hopeful, I guess. So I just went with it. You know, you got to have a starting point, got to start somewhere, and of course it hit as soon as it started to open. Now, the culprit, or the problem, is this piece that sticks up here. If that was just straight across this hinge, it would be a lot easier. But I need it to lift up as it opens. I need the whole thing to go up, so that clears the body. And that's kind of how some car doors work. So I started playing around with car door hinge design. And this is kind of what I want. Now, what I drew here is thicker than my parts, and that's higher than it really needs to be. And this is just a piece of styrene, a plastic card. And if I kind of put that here, and I just put a little pin, let me zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. If I put that about there somewhere, let's say I start with the closest hinge point, and I pivot it about there, you can tell right there, that hits pretty close, pretty quick. That contact's pretty quick. Plus, it's interfering all the way up to here, so there's no way that would work, so I need to go further out. So if we go out to the next one, that's better, but it still hits there. And that's pretty close, actually, to what I want. And like I said, that's what I drew is thicker than the actual model. So, and I think that's lifted high enough. If we go to the next one, that puts it about where I drew it. But again, that's actually higher than I want. So I kind of need my pivot point to be between those two. And I think that would be pretty good. I think that would work. Now, I kind of mocked that up a little bit so there's the hinge, and I just glued a piece of aluminum here to here. And this kind of works. Now, I do have that too high. So when I put it on the model, the door is too low. So this was just kind of a rough mock-up. But it does hit as I open it if we use this instead of the model. So putting it like there, putting that close where I want it. As we open it, well, you can see it hits that part of the spacer I put in there. So if I could get rid of that, then that would work. So if I lowered that whole thing down and got rid of that spacer, I think that would work. So I just need to remake the hinge kind of shaped like that. Now I found this piece of extrusion. This was part of a frame, as like a picture or like a poster frame or something, where the glass in the photo went back here. And I just cut it up into the pieces. And this kind of gives me, I mean, I'm going to have to cut it and mill it and stuff, but I think I can get that shape that I want from that hinge out of that. So I got a lot of work to do, more experimenting. I got to cut this up and try to get it to work. I'll get back with you once I've got something that actually kind of works. Okay, well, I hate to admit it, but it took me probably 5 hours just to figure this out. So there's the flap closed, and there it's open. And you'll notice that it clears here perfectly fine. As it raises up, it kind of swings over top of that edge. And I'll take this apart so you can see how it works, but I finally got it working. Now, notice I don't have any bolts or rivets in here yet. That part is just kind of glued in. But yeah, I'll take that apart so you can see how it works. But that's pretty much what what I was kind of going for. I honestly didn't want it necessarily going that far forward as it opens, but I think this is perfectly good enough. I'm happy with that. I think the only way to get it to do what I was imagining before I started is if I had the actual hinge part of it kind of on the surface here, or maybe a little bit above the surface here, but then the hinge would have been perfectly visible, and I still would have had countersunk screws, and I didn't want the hinge visible. The countersunk screws I'm okay with because I'll paint those brown when it's all done, and they won't be as obvious or noticeable. So, and I might even fill over them. I don't know. Then you couldn't take it apart. So I'll probably just paint those brown, but the hinge is all inside. You can't see the hinge, and it opens and clears fine. It even kind of stays where you put it. So I'm happy with that. So let me take this off and show you what the hinge itself looks like. So we'll just take the two screws out here. Now I'll show you once it's out, but that surface on the inside is not perfectly flat. It is a little bit curved because, again, it's just the carbon fiber that was laid in there. And so I had to add a little bit of a spacer under this one so the door wouldn't be crooked. But we'll see that when I get this apart here. So there's the hinge. So I could still keep what I made before. There's the spacer. It's just a washer that I C8 onto it. That basically, because of the curve of the inside, I needed that to hold that straight. Without this, the whole door would have been crooked that way a little bit. So again, that's just glued on there. But the hinge is screwed onto that bracket and, of course, screwed onto the model. And that bracket right now, you'll notice I had to set that in. I had to mill the thickness down so that bracket would set flush, because that part of the model would have actually caught the edge of that if it wasn't flush. And right now that's just glued in place, but I will drill out and put some rivets and or bolts in here to secure it better. Now, it didn't have to be that shape. It very easily could have just been straight down and over, or that could have been curved. You know, it could have been anything to basically put the hinge point here and leave that open for that part of the model to kind of flip into. In other words, it's doing that, like that. So, you know, that bracket could have just been a hoop or a curve or whatever. But that's what I had, so I didn't have to make anything special. That just happened to fit, and once it's all installed, you can't really see that. Now, I did have to carve away a little bit here to clear, I guess that's like an engine thruster or something. I don't know. Who knows what that is? But in order for that to clear, I had to carve away a little bit right there. That was easy enough. I might probably won't, but I might go in here and take that hinge back off and just mill that off so it's flush with that. I don't know. So it works. It'll never be seen, but it works. And I got to tell you, of everything on this model so far, this has probably been the thing that's, I don't know, it's not complicated, but it took me the longest to kind of figure out. So the next thing I need to do is make a bracket that will attach here, and that bracket will have an actuator, and that actuator, I will probably, more than likely, just do something similar that I did at the front of the model that goes to the handlebars, and just make another thing like that to put on a bracket, and then a tube for the other end. And the other end of that tube won't even be visible when it's all together. You'll just see that part of the actuator kind of coming in and out as you open and close the flap. So I still got to make that. That's fairly straightforward, nothing special there. So what I'm going to do, I got to take that back off to clean it up, sand it, drill some holes, put some rivets and bolts in. Let me finalize all of this. I got to sand all that smooth too, because that looks kind of bad. So I'll just finish all of this, finalize all of this, and show you what it looks like when it's all done. But yeah, that thing, what a pain in the butt. But now I know how to do it, and hopefully that washer's loose. I got to reglue that on so it doesn't fall apart. But hopefully the other side won't take nearly as long, because now I know what I'm doing. So yeah, I'll get back with you here in just a little bit. Okay, here's the other side. And see, I got the holes drilled. I still need to countersink them. And did the hinge just like the first one. There's a little bracket for the actuator, and it is bolted in place. And for the actuator, just looks like this. A steel rod threaded onto one of those little ball ends, and then an aluminum tube with the ball end just kind of glued into the other side of it. And so if we take a look at what that looks like on the other one, there's the piston part. We'll take the cylinder, and that just moves like that. To attach it right there, I will more than likely just screw that to an aluminum plate and then epoxy it in place. I really don't want any more screws coming through the carbon fiber. So, and this is a really low stress part, so just kind of hanging out there. There's not going to be any stress or force on it. So yeah, let me get this all assembled and show you what it looks like when it's done. Okay, so there's, of course, the body off, and I've got both back flapper things installed. That one is pretty much done. This one, as you can see, I've got the actuator. Like I said, I screwed it to an aluminum plate. See if that'll focus. I screwed it to an aluminum plate, and then I bonded the plate in there with epoxy, and I'm just waiting for the epoxy to set, and then I'll put that back on the body. You can kind of get an idea there of the hinge, how that looks. So yeah, once that's fully set, I'll put it back on the body, and then I'll show you what it all looks like. Okay, there they are. So there's with them kind of just half open. Of course, they close like that. I'll touch up the paint on those screws and that back edge during all the final fit and finish stuff, but that's fully closed, and then it opens to there, and you can see there's that little actuator end. So you can see the actuator in there as that opens and closes. I'm happy with that. I think it looks good. But I'll tell you, that, all of that was a pain in the butt. Now you can tell it needs some cleaning up. All of that's going to get painted or something. So it all needs a final cleanup and final paint. But yeah, that's it. And that's it for this video. And as always, until next time, thanks for watching.